morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Hospitality Tech Revolution, Building the Optimal Hotel Tech Stack with Event Temple, M3, Stay in Touch, and Travotech. Before we start the webinar, I just want to go through a little bit of housekeeping. So we will be recording this webinar and sending everyone who's registered for the webinar a recording of the event. You'll receive that tomorrow morning. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to ask them and we'll do our best to answer them. We love an engaged audience, so let us know if you have any comments or anything in the chat box. And let's start off by introducing our panelists. So let's start with Tom Underwood from Stay in Touch. Tom, how are you today?
Great, doing well. Thank you, Sam. I'm Tom Underwood, CEO of Stay in Touch. Joined about 3 months ago. Stay in Touch, for anybody not familiar, offers a cloud-native property management system with contactless check-in. It's easy to use, easy to implement. We've been implementing hotels in 3 weeks without doing it all remotely, actually. Prior to that, or prior to joining Stay in Touch, I was running Orbitz Worldwide's hotel division until we sold to Expedia, then worked with Paul English at Lola.com. You go back many years ago, I worked at Morgan Keegan, where we took a bunch of hotel assets public and non-paired share hotel REITs. Look forward to the conversation.
Me too, thank you. I know your experience will be very valuable today. Next up, we have Mark Vancourt. Mark from Travotech. Mark, how are you today?
Good, Sam. Good morning, everyone. How are you? Yeah, just briefly, Travotech is a consultancy that focuses specifically on travel and hospitality technology. We help the operator community as well as the vendor community based on our prior experience. My career has been in our industry for about 33 years now, and operations, vendor technology, leading technology for hospitality corporations around the world, and then of course consulting now. So we blend that together to ideally provide value to the people that we're working with, and hopefully some today as well. So thanks for having me.
Perfect, thank you for being here. Next up, we have Cassie Johnson from M3. Cassie, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Little background on M3. We've been hosting solutions in a private cloud for just over 20 years. Back office integrated solutions for accounting, business intelligence, and labor management. I got my start in the industry about 25 years ago, so I'm dating myself, in college, working front desk. I loved it so much I changed my major to hotel and restaurant administration. I don't know what I was thinking, but it seemed exciting, and then managed a hotel right out of school, learned a lot about operations, learned a lot about what I didn't know, which was invaluable. Came over to M3, kind of worked through the different areas and departments within the company. I have a really strong passion for hospitality and a lot of respect for people out in the field, especially what they've gone through this last year. So happy to be here. Hopefully some of the information we share today is helpful to them.
Perfect. And last but not least, Bob Graham. Bob, how are you doing?
Good. Yeah, thanks, Sam. So I'm co-founder at Event Temple. We have 2 products here, Hotel Sales CRM and Hotel Catering Software. Focus on things like event management, sales prospecting, room block management. Prior to Event Temple, I was in sales. After that, I built a national event company, which I ultimately sold. Then I decided, hey, I'm going to take a year off and learn how to code, which was a great idea. Just kidding. It was really hard. At that time, I met my partner, business partner and co-founder at Event Temple, who I found was a much better software engineer than I am. He said, Bob, becoming great at software engineering is like learning how to play guitar. You can do it, but it's going to take 10 to 15 years. So if you ever want to start a business, I suggest you partner with someone. So that's exactly what we did. And a friend of mine was struggling with legacy tech at her hotel. So we would just go in there, a couple times a week, meet with her, see what she was doing. We built the software that way. So we never really saw other catering software or sales software for hotels. It was just her feedback is how it was born. Today we're in hypergrowth mode. We even grew through COVID, which surprised even me, to be honest. and we're in thousands, or we have thousands of users in 25 countries.
Awesome. So let's set the scene for the webinar. So the hospitality industry is in the midst of a technological revolution. Hotels are being faced with the difficult task of evaluating a variety of solutions to ensure optimal performance at their properties. Hotel executives are faced with challenges like budget, integration capabilities, and multi-property scalability. As tech solutions continue to advance and now options are introduced to the industry, hotel operators need to effectively evaluate and implement integrated solutions for their portfolio. But how do you decide what to invest in and what to leave behind? Whether you're a large hospitality brand or a boutique hotel property, the companies that will lead the road to recovery will have implemented an integrated tech stack that is designed to make their life easier and your guests' lives easier. We're starting to see hotels convert their technology from server-based to cloud-based. So I'd love to kick it off by asking, why is investing in cloud more important than ever? And what should hoteliers be looking for when evaluating cloud-based software? Tom, we'll start with you.
Great, thank you, Sam. Stay in Touch has always been cloud-based. We were founded that way, and that's been the premise of the company. In terms of what hotels should be looking for and working with the cloud, there's a range of solutions from those that offer a single comprehensive tech stack for smaller hotels to companies like ours, where we integrate successfully with many other partners, such as M3, Event Temple, et cetera. So, and then there are some that have even more complex systems. So finding the system that's right for your hotel is absolutely critical. At Stay in Touch, we're very much focused on being guest-centric.
Awesome. And then Cassie, over to you.
So some of the things to consider relating to cloud technology is how flexible it can be for your needs. Like not just accessing data on the go, but critical tasks that you need to manage on property and even at the corporate office day in and day out. So cloud technology gives you that opportunity to kind of, not that this is always a good thing, but take your work with you, right? We've all taken our work with us remotely for the last year, and cloud technology really facilitated that. When you're choosing those providers and looking at what fits best for your property or your organization, you know, I always recommend you look for those with experience, not just in the software space itself or whatever discipline you're trying to solve, but in the industry, people that understand hotels and restaurants and really get that, because that's going to just bring everything together for you more seamlessly. And then look for a proven track record. As Tom was saying, you know, Stay in Touch has been implementing a lot of solutions remotely in a very short amount of time. So they do have a lot of that experience already under their belt.
Perfect. Great advice. And Bob or Mark, over to you now.
Yeah, well, look, I think, you know, when we talk to people, I think the word association that you have to use with cloud is current. And, you know, good advice is that whenever you're investing in technology, whatever the technology, it should be as current as you can possibly have it, because as everyone would be aware, that the pace of change in technology now is so rapid that what is current today, you know, in a matter of months is no longer current. So, you know, some of the upsides of cloud-based technology at the various levels that it's available, and certainly at the software level with my colleagues here, is currency. So it's both currency of the technology environment itself, but the other upside of it, of course, is that it's currency of the actual software. So from a simplicity perspective, you avoid, you know, the management of moving through software versions, which, you know, is absolutely critical if you want a return on your investment. But cloud deployment simplifies that because, you know, it's all happening behind the scenes without you having to really do anything from a business disruption perspective. I think that the keys to finding the right partners, you know, is definitely experience. But more than that, you know, I always feel that when you're approaching any technology selection, it is an asset, asset-based decision. Technology management is asset management at the end of the day. So you're looking for people who've got the runs on the board and got the experience, but also has the breadth to go where you might go. And that's often an unknown in today's world. So, our advice is always that you should really start with the end in mind, meaning a very long-term future vision, because particularly when you're choosing a software vendor, it should be a very long-term asset-based decision. You don't want to be, despite the fact that people say, well, it's easy to change software in a SaaS world, it doesn't mean you want to. You want to make the right decisions, and you want to get stability in your business environment, because at the end of the day, these tools are your business process, and that's not something that you want to constantly be changing, particularly if you're a young brand that's growing, or if you're an existing brand that has a fairly broad application.
Awesome. And I love that thought of really looking at the long-term journey with your partners. And Bob, over to you.
Yeah, so one thing we've definitely seen speaking with different hotel salespeople is we just have less people on staff at the properties working in sales departments, right? So if you are lucky enough to have kept your job through this, first of all, congrats, because so many didn't, which is very hard. But the unfortunate news is you're doing more work than ever, right? Even though there's fewer bookings, somehow we're covering for other people. And so efficiency has become a lot more important. So that's one big thing, is looking at cloud-based technology to remove steps from the everyday workflow. It can be simple things like inputting data, clicking through screens. You start to notice it when you're using it all day, every day. The other one is, obviously, we're not meeting face-to-face as much as we used to. So as we're all doing right now in this Zoom, the cloud enables you to connect online, and that can mean, the ability to communicate quicker, but it also can give you real-time visibility into what's going on when you have two people working in remote locations, which I'm sure all of us have experienced in some way. Just encourage you to think about your whole tech stack looking like that. And then finally, I think, as tough as COVID has been, there is some silver lining and an opportunity here where you don't have as much business risk generally, because you don't have as many events or as many bookings coming up, right? So the system has a temporary lull until things pick back up. I'm definitely predicting a big pickup after this is over. But you're able to make those switches without doing it while you've got all these different events or bookings or guests coming in. And so, that can give you lower cost, right? When you switch from a legacy provider, give you higher ROI because people are adopting it. You can now integrate solutions in new and different ways to enable communication and more accurate data. And that to me is the big one why I'm excited for today's webinar, because you see, in the hotel industry, we don't make our money by doing some radical shift generally. We make incremental revenue, right? So how can you add, optimization here, optimization here? Well, you need all the data consolidated to be able to do that. And so I think that that's another benefit of cloud-based systems. They can talk to each other. And then, as Mark mentioned, you get the best-in-class technology because it's the newest. It's updated live. Engineers can push updates from anywhere. And so you're paying for this thing, but it keeps getting better every month, every year. And you can give feedback, and you'll see that come in the software. And that's not how we're used to in this industry. So those are some of the exciting things, I think, why the cloud is important.
No, definitely. And I mean, I know we had this conversation as a company about deferred demand, and are hotels ready for that deferred demand to come back, and how are they preparing for that? And one of the ways that they can is by reevaluating their tech stack and investing in integrated systems, which is a great segue into our next topic, investing in integrated systems. So traditionally, hotels have been presented with technology that has an all-in-one solution. This has ended up resulting in kind of a slow and clunky system that lack features or integration capabilities, or integrations are extremely expensive. So in today's landscape, tech companies are changing the script and offering specialized solutions with open API, which can read as affordable connectivity. Building integrated solutions have proven to be cost-effective and operationally efficient for hotels. So what should hotels look for when building an integrated tech stack, and what exactly should that evaluation process look like for hotels? Cassie, we'll start with you.
Sure. So, I mean, the first thing when I really think about integrations on behalf of our customers and the users, it's not always just about integrating the software, right? It really is about integrating companies with each other for the mutual beneficial relationship that serves the users. So that's one of the biggest things that I see that stands out from a true integration is how those companies work together end to end through sales, implementation, onboarding, and post-sales support and that sort of thing. But we've learned we're most successful when we focus on our core competencies. So when you have a true integration with another partner, you can stay in your lane. You can focus on what you're good at. You can find partners that can deliver value in what they're good at and what they can do for the users. And so then at that point, you know you're getting the best in class for a particular function, making you more efficient and hopefully making your operations streamlined. When you're making that decision, though, you still need to understand what your role is in the integration process. You know, that term kind of gets thrown around pretty loosely. We all like to use API as the new way of doing things, but that still is designed and built and deployed by humans, right? So there's still an element of interaction. How is the vendor maintaining their integrations? You know, what kind of monitoring or alerts, what happens if the integration fails? What do you as the user need to do on a day-to-day basis? Is there anything you're required to do to help support that integration? Is there data validation you need to do? Understand what data points are going from point A to point B, making sure that's exactly what you need and it's thorough and fleshed out, you know, and go the extra mile to ask those questions about security. And then review your whole tech stack to make sure you're not just integrating to integrate and that you're not duplicating functionality. I see that a lot because, you know, some people claim they have integrations and they can pass all this data around, but then you end up with more software than what you really need.
Definitely. And I think back when I was on the hotel side of things, I didn't really understand exactly what to look for, what data points to ask for when looking at an integration. It was kind of a buzzword around our property. So really understanding exactly what you need the systems to communicate to each other is key when building out that tech stack. And Bob, I'd love to hear your input on this.
Sure. Well, I mentioned yesterday when we were chatting, I think intuitively we know that the person making, say, a cake for our wedding probably shouldn't be a full-time surgeon that's also our realtor, right? We specialize in society because when you do that and you focus on one thing, you get a better result. Software is no different, right? So you want to have an integrated stack simply for the reason that if you have 20 different pieces in your software, say I owned a legacy software company, it would be very hard for us to choose and prioritize which part of that software to maintain and to improve. So when we do just a small piece, and in Event Temple's case, we do sales and catering, we have to put all of our focus on those pieces. And it turns out it's a very hard problem because it needs to be powerful, it needs to be simple, it needs to be high quality. And then the integrations themselves, I think there's a lot of confusion because in the old school days, everything was on one system. So that's one way of looking at it. Now we're being told a lot about these marketplaces. Can I really just connect things without the vendors knowing each other? Is it plug and play? And the truth is there's somewhere in between, and it depends on what you're connecting. So I'll give you an example. If you were connecting messages on Facebook Messenger and you want to put them as leads in Event Temple, that's what I would call a low risk integration, where you can just connect that online using something like Zapier or just connecting the two sites together. It's doing one thing simply. When we look at a PMS integration, so like we have with Stay in Touch, there's multiple pieces of data, like over a dozen, transiting data both ways live that have to be perfectly in sync. And so you need to maintain that integration. What worries us actually is when we look at other companies on the market in all spaces in hospitality, you can actually go see on LinkedIn how many engineers they have on their team and how many integrations they have listed on their website. I think that's an interesting exercise to do because you can see pretty quickly who's going to be able to maintain a high quality of integration standard and who's not. And it will catch up because it is hard to maintain these. It takes a lot of work. It's not build it once and leave it. It's ongoing maintenance. by highly skilled, very expensive software engineers, right? And they need to be on it because that integration and that API, it gets updated all the time too. So as we build the software and improve it, which we're always going to do, our API changes. And as our partners' APIs and products change and evolve, that all needs to stay in sync, and it should ideally get better over time. And then the last thing we look for at Event Temple is we go narrow and deep on any partnership. So the reason for that is it takes so much work, and we need to be very close, and we need to trust those companies that they're going to deliver on that integration at the same standard we are. And that involves the same effort towards maintaining that integration and building on it that we put in. And of course, it's difficult to find that because it's like any relationship. You have to get to know each other. It's built over time. There's a lot of trust involved. And so for us, we don't feel we can trust 1,000 companies at scale. It's just too hard to build those relationships. So we'd rather find a few and be very strong that way. So I would encourage hoteliers to think about integrations and APIs a little bit differently, right? What are small, low risk connections and what are big pieces? And do those big pieces really have a partnership? And are they aligned on also where they're going in the future? I think those are good ways to look at it.
Definitely. And I think when we're working with other partners, how they also respond to any bugs or issues right away. And when you do have that deeper partnership, you're going to find that you have resolution happens quicker as well. Tom, what is your opinion on integrated tech stack?
I'm going to have to agree with Bob. And what I mean by that is not all integrations are created equal. So you have some that are truly deep integrations where things work well together, and you have others that are more superficial. One way, something that you can put as a badge or as just a checkbox. For us, similar to Bob, focusing on deep integrations that truly do benefit the customer, the hotels and the guests is what's critical for us. And so we would rather have very tight integrations with best in class services than many broad integrations that may not be as functional as everyone would like. In addition to that, one thing I'd also note is that there's the integration from a technical standpoint. There's also the integration from UI training and other standpoints. So along those lines, we are intuitive and easy to use by nature. So we built a system that would Stay in Touch that could be a customer, meaning a hotelier, could train on quickly. Some of the others here, same thing. Bob, very intuitive in terms of sales and catering. And so it works well because of the UI components in addition to the tight integration.
Perfect. And I think this is a great segue over to you, Mark, where you kind of help the hotels in building those tech stacks. So I'd love to hear your opinion on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk about here, and I think one of the things that I've always recognized about our industry is that there's always a hesitancy for technology. Some of it's because of understanding, some of it's because of capital and asset-based investment strategies and funding in general. But I think the main takeaway here is that our industry and technology in general is going through what will be one of the major technology platform shifts, right? So one of the things I always sort of say to people in our industry is, look, at the end of the day, we are not an industry that builds technology. We're an industry that consumes technology. So we're operationally, we're very vendor-led. We rely on our vendors to bring capability to our business. And there's nothing wrong with that, because at the end of the day, what we are good at is being hoteliers. And but I think the main thing that you have to remember when it comes to investing in integrated systems is that at the end of the day, what you're really doing here is you're building a way of doing business. And the thing that's changed, certainly from throughout my career and as people have sort of become more astute with these things, is that today technology is your business process. And And if it isn't, it's probably because you're fighting your technology, which isn't advisable, because at the end of the day, the more you fight the way that your technology works, the more manual process you have to create and the less efficient you become. So I would encourage people that are listening to think about, when they're finding a business tool or a collection of business tools, that it's really a reflection of how you choose to operate your business. Going back to the integration side of things, well, I will just say that integration, Bob, I think Cassie and Tom all touched on this, it's a very overused word in our industry. It's actually one of my bugbear words. They're interfaces, they're not integrations, because integration means one. So when we talk about multiple systems, they're actually interfaces, and API stands for application programming interfaces. So we've always had interfaces, and they're absolutely necessary for effective industry operation. What's changed is that we've moved into a world where there's sort of a tacit global agreement amongst software providers on what is the best way to do this. And the result of that is faster interface development, opportunities to sort of consolidate and share information more readily. And for you as a hotelier, the most important thing is what that means is reduce costs, which everyone's talked about. So having said that, and again, I fully agree, you cannot underestimate the effort that goes into building these connections. It's extreme. I used to work for Fidelio and Micros once upon a time. We had thousands of them and a massive team to try and keep them up to date, as Bob touched on. It's not easy, but it's the difference between a great working environment for your staff and ultimately the customer experience that you're able to deliver because of it. I think the other thing too is that a lot of the risk that I probably grew up with in my career has come out of technology today. This transition to what we call cloud has predominantly brought stability to the industry. And for hotels and hospitality companies where we're often resource challenged when it comes to technology capacity, that's a great thing. That means that your systems are more survivable, they work longer. And as vendors come into the market on the back of API technology, what we're seeing is, I would almost call it an explosion of interconnectivity between various companies. So for you as a hotelier, what's that mean? That's great. That's all about choice, right? I think the other thing too is that, one of the things that we hear a lot about in the industry is, well, should I or should I not go to the cloud? I would encourage hoteliers not to get yourselves too wrapped up in that, because you're not, eventually your legacy technology and certainly your new technology vendors will be in the cloud. That's all about it. And they're going to do that regardless of whether the industry thinks that should or shouldn't be done, because that is the most effective and efficient way to build technology today. So the bigger question is, well, when are you going there and what is it that you're waiting for? And I think that overall, my experience has been, I think I first went on to sort of cloud-based technology in the late 10s. For me, it was overall a very, very good experience. And certainly from a stability, definitely from a cost of operation, but more so from the flexibility perspective. And it's only accelerated massively from there. So your risks are definitely lower. And ultimately, you want to build an easier working environment for your operational teams. That's key, that sits at the center of this. And Bob, I think, touched on before that, one of the things I was reading about yesterday too is a lot of talk about coming out of COVID, how, operators may not go back to, pre-COVID staffing levels. So as he said, that means that your team have to be able to do more. And the only way you can help them do more is by systems that interoperate well with each other, which means they can effectively do more. And in the past, we've very much been demarked by I guess, line of business applications that were quite rigid and confined job roles. And that is definitely something that's going to change over the next 10 years in our industry. So that has to be a key factor in driving towards interconnected systems.
So Mark, I saw an interesting question pop up that I wanted to touch on and get your opinion on too, is that it was about why hotel chains are still on legacy systems and should they develop their own. And I was just going to add, we have a team of software engineers at Event Temple, and I consider myself still young-ish at age 36, right? I'm not as young as I once was, that's for sure. But these guys make me feel so old because I'll share an article with them and they're like, Bob, that's 2 days old. What are you thinking? Like, we all read that, they're just moving so lightning fast that I can't keep up. And the things they're thinking about, they're not thinking about how to make APIs faster on their spare time. I mean, they do that at work every day. They're reading about these billionaires sending spaceships trying to go to Mars or build societies out, and it's just crazy the pace of technology.
It is.
And the reason I bring that up is I would never look to these giant companies to set pace for my business, right? So that's one thing my business partner taught me early on. I said, his name's Puyan. I said, Puyan, why don't we use this system? This other big software company in town uses them. And he said, well, they're old, that system. It's not good anymore. If you want to know the best system, it's going to be one of the newer ones you maybe haven't heard, or it's going to be an old one that's, constantly adapting and changing and staying up to date. It's got to be one of the two, right? So be careful with that. I think because they're so big, they take a lot of time to move and switch.
Yeah, no, mate, it's true. And look, I grew through that in my own career. And look, I always say it's not to say that anything is right or wrong. It's just what I've learned is it's life stages of the business. So all of you, right? All of the three of you. Well, right now, Bob, Tom, as you said, you started on cloud. Bob, you started on cloud. Cassie, I'm not fully conversant with M3, but I believe it's also on cloud. One day, all of you will have to migrate your entire solution. And what I can tell you from experience of going through that with multiple organizations is that's not easy. And what is that? That's a massive shift for your customers as well. So I don't think, I don't like a lot of the dialogue that goes on in our industry about, better, worse. It's just different stages of different businesses. And I think that, Providence being what it is, you and a lot of the newer organizations that have come to industry will go through that phase at some life in your business. And what you'll all find out is it's really hard. It's easy when you start on something new and new stays new for a while, you can race forward, and you're right, you're nimble. But once you've got, let's use the one that everyone likes to bash. I mean, when you've got 80,000 customers around the world relying on your technology to make their business run soundly, that's a risk management decision. It's not frivolous, I don't like to take away from anything that anyone's done, because everything that we've all done together has collectively brought us to the stage that we're at today as an industry. And that's a great thing, right? Because our industry's gotten better as a result. I was just looking at the question there that one of my mates from Holland has popped up there, and yeah, software development is becoming cheaper all the time, and it probably always will, and eventually it'll be doing it by itself without the help of humans. Does that mean that if you're not in the software development business, you should get into it? I'm not so convinced in that. I think there are two answers to that. I'd answered that question, I think, a year or so ago on the World Panel on Hospitality Net. I think there are some things that you do in-house, more aligned to an existing platform that you're using, such as some type of reporting or business intelligence tool or that type of thing, which might be aligned along the specific needs of the information set you want within your business. But for example, would it be a good idea for any hotel company to go out and build a business intelligence platform? No. I mean, I just don't. Just don't. I mean, would it be good for me sitting here as an individual to go and build an office automation or an email platform? No. Like, I don't see the benefit in that. Our industry, the hospitality industry, is cutthroat and very, very tough to be successful in, and it takes all your focus to do it. And when you shift your focus away from that, you shift your focus. And certainly the big organizations that that have had, in fairness to them, their legacy technology from a distribution perspective, which is of course mission critical, and it's there are many benefits to owning that yourself, but it comes with a lot of cons too. And having been in that space for a sector of my career, things move faster, and it comes back to the last question, which is really, it's about data flow through between systems, and that's really where a lot of those big stacks and older techs just sort of can't keep up, because it's such a development lift to get that functionality in that you sort of go, wow, is it worth doing it? IHG, for example, would not have gone to Amadeus if they felt like they could keep Holodecks moving and get the functionality they wanted. I think that's a great example.
Yes, but Mark, as you were mentioning yesterday, they do work. So the systems for the legacy systems, what they were designed to do, they still function.
That's right.
But over time, the user base changes, the functionality desired by the hotel companies change, and then the big hotel companies are big because they are successful. They have developed very good standards and a process that is very successful within hospitality. For those, as we were talking about earlier, and as Bob was mentioning, he focuses on one thing very well: sales and catering. Stay in Touch focuses on one thing very well: property management system. M3 focuses on a couple of things very, very well: accounting and having BI on top of it. So things will become more specialized, and large companies will move at their own pace. You mentioned that they're not going to be the early adopters because of risk management and many other things. That said, the ones that succeed will focus on what their core competencies are and what led them to succeed in the first place.
Yeah, I fully agree. Absolutely. But
I need to know where this cheaper software development is accessed. So
I was gonna say that too.
if someone wants to send that information to me offline, please do that. And the other point on that, I mean, living through it, having been in operations and then moving to technology, I mean, it was a huge eye opener to kind of see under the hood, so to speak, of what goes into building software. But it's never just one and done. Everyone's kind of touched on that, but I just want to reiterate, whatever shiny object you're buying today, like Mark said, you got to have the long view. Does that company keep up with you? Do they really have the staying power? Do they want to keep reinvesting over and over again?
Yeah.
And is it part of your vision long-term for your company? But you're never done building software, ever. Anyone that wants to build their own, just know you are never done. There is a shelf life to everything you do.
That's right.
Cassie, I would also add, before I was learning software, I used to think of it like it's like a bricklayer, right? You just give the instructions and they do it. It turns out it's a lot more like being an architect, if you do it properly. And like a great architect is hard to find and very expensive. So you can get lower priced bricklayers for sure, but you might get what you pay for too. So that's something I'd encourage everyone to think about when it comes to software too, is even in sales and catering, the types of decisions we make every day are very complex for things that to you just seem like a click. And building it is even harder. Like you can envision it and then, okay, how are we going to pull this off, right? So I would just urge that too, even if you have a staff of engineers to buy and build this thing, yourself, you have to be very involved or have people that are highly, highly invested, like owners of that software company. So to do it right, it's going to need to look a lot like its own business anyways, which I would just ask, what's the ultimate upside? Is it cost savings? Because it's probably not worth it. If you're going to spin it off as its own entity, maybe, but look at it as any new business. You may as well open up a chain of restaurants or something like that. I really do see it like that. It's very hard to do correctly. I was shocked after a year into this thing. I thought, okay, this is all in, like committed and focused and extremely challenging.
Oh, it's massive. It's massive. And it gets harder over time because your customers want more. So, and you can't say, as you said, Cassie, you can't say no, because if you say no, part of the double-edged sword of cloud technology is they'll go somewhere else. That's it. I always say that your product gets you in the door, but it's your service that keeps you there. You don't hear too many people complaining about software product. Largely, you hear them complaining about after-sales service.
And that's perfect to roll into our last point of discussion, the scalability and deployment of software tech with your property or your business. So usually hoteliers like to test the water, either purchase tech for a certain percentage of their portfolio or elect for a waterfall rollout with an opt-out clause. This means that the post-sale journey is arguably the most important factor in determining whether or not the vendor-client relationship will work. So what should hotels look for when evaluating scalability at both the individual and multi-property level? And what should they expect the post-sale journey to look like? Mark, we'll start with you.
Well, look, going back to something we said right at the top, which is, you've got to start with the end in mind. And I think what I often see is that people's businesses go in a direction that they didn't necessarily foresee, and it ends up meaning that their tools don't do the job anymore. So I would encourage people to take a broad brush on what they believe their business could look like 10 years down the track and approach their technology selections from that perspective. Because even if it doesn't come to pass, or it doesn't come to pass on the timeline, at least the capability exists to go where you have to go versus going, well, I've run into a brick wall, now I have to start again, because that's, obviously a big issue. I've always believed that your software technology decisions are a very, very long-term decision. And if you do it well, you should be planning to build a very, very long partnership with that vendor. Yes, you can change technology, but for anyone who's done it, you'll realize it's not easy. So your decision-making process is extremely important. One of the things that has traditionally been a problem with our industry is the international capability of vendors and their software products. It's becoming less so, but still, I've got stories in my life where I worked with or for companies where they said, well, why would you want to work in a currency other than US dollars? So, these things are fundamental, and you just don't know, where your business might go or where you might get taken because of some other relationships that you have. The other aspect of it, I think, is capability. And, going back to what I said before, is that the product gets you in the door as a vendor, but it's how you serve your customers after the fact that keeps you there. And the reason I highlight that is because one of the great challenges of our industry, in my view, has always been somewhat of an immature approach to technology. We don't asset manage technology. We just buy it and throw it in there and sort of hope it's going to do the job. And that, in my view, is fundamentally wrong. You get out of your technology what you put into it. And what that means is that between you and your vendor, there needs to be a continued focus on making sure that, the term that everyone wants to throw around, ROI, you get an ROI on your technology investment. Well, the way you get an ROI on your technology investment is you use the hell out of it, right? And to use the hell out of it, it means you've got to know what you're doing. And very, very quickly in our industry, because of turnover and attrition, your knowledgeable staff disappear very quickly. So, you know, there are two aspects to that. One is that, you know, hopefully your tools are, you know, somewhat intuitive for them. But even beyond that, there needs to be ongoing education, because that's where your business efficiencies will slip as an operator. You know, you must keep the knowledge base up, because that's how you use your tools more effectively. That's where efficiency and productivity comes from, and that's what drives your customer satisfaction. When you let them slip, what ends up happening is all of a sudden you think my technology doesn't work when it does, and then you start looking for other systems when in actual fact you've already got a really good one, you just forgot how to use it. So I think that's mission critical, is how you continue to engage and how your vendor continues to engage with your business down the line of the relationship.
Perfect. And Tom, I'd love to hear Stay in Touch's approach to scalability and deployment.
Sure. And first, to just touch a little bit on what Mark was saying, using the technology is absolutely critical. So technology that's broadly deployed by Stay in Touch or by our competition generally works. The question is, how effectively are the hoteliers and the guests using it? So from our standpoint, what we're seeing is, as Bob was mentioning, there is a lot of turnover. There is reduced labor at hotels. But right now, there is a lot of labor coming back. We're seeing hotels, especially in North America, and more specifically the United States, beginning to ramp up pretty quickly. But as they do so, it's frequently with different employees than were there prior to the shutdown. So having technology that employees can ramp quickly is critical. To get to your question on scaling, and you mentioned that hotels or companies will frequently work with one and then look to expand. We're seeing that all over the place. There are lots of management companies of significant sizes that begin with a pilot. They see how well a particular solution works with the needs of their business and the other components of their business. So the sales and catering, the accounting, the booking engine, the many systems on property, et cetera. And once it's ironed out, once they get confident, then usually you see broad deployment. And as Mark said, it's not a short-term solution. And if you get it wrong, it is very, very painful to change.
Totally, I agree. And Cassie, over to you.
Sure. So, you know, we like to think of scalability as like self-service, right? So if you are growing your portfolio, you need to have the ability to just add to the solution, add your new properties, whatever entities you need to manage, and kind of go on with life. You know, that part is critical to keep things moving. Usually when transactions happen, there's short notice, not a lot of runway lead time. So you want that kind of provider that understands that. And, you know, then additional like ability to add modules or features down the line when it makes sense for your business. It is really, really hard to adopt everything within a solution all at the same time. So you need to kind of have that in your roadmap and your own planning as far as priorities, what you need to do first. But please go back, you know, and revisit that roadmap and reintroduce the concepts and adopt those additional features down the line. It's often too easy to implement the initial phase and then never go back to the rest of the application and improve those efficiencies. So you really need to be careful about that.
Awesome. Bob, we'll head over to you before we go into the Q&A.
Sure. So I would just encourage everyone when looking at technology not to just ask about the features. Typically on an RFP, we get, do you do this, do you do this, do you do this, do you do this? And I'll just give a secret. It's very easy for every vendor to say yes to that, right? Because usually there's a way you do it. And I don't think it's that useful. Instead, I would ask the company representative you're speaking with, hey, where are you going? Where do you think the future of this industry is? What's important to you? What are you doubling down on? And what are you not doubling down on? And if the company doesn't have an answer to that, that's a red flag. Because again, you're back to that scenario where they're being everything to everyone. And that basically is a recipe that tells you in some way it's not going to be world class. I think we all know if you want to be great, you can't be good, right? So you need to really focus. For us, we really care a lot about sales, right? We think sales and catering, if we had our way, we'd separate the two words actually, and we'd probably just do one of the two. The industry demands that we do both. That is why we do both, because that's what everyone's used to. But there's not really a true hotel sales system out there. You couldn't do free trials. The pricing wasn't on the website. There was nothing for select service properties at a low cost. You couldn't scale it up and down. You couldn't reduce users during COVID. So if you asked me about our business philosophy, you probably would have learned a lot more about what it would be like to partner with us than if you went through a feature checklist on a demo. And I've actually learned a ton from Tom, Cassie, and running this stuff by Mark too, to say like, yes, that's the case for all these businesses, right? So you can get a sense of the roadmap by learning a bit about how the company's thinking about their own business, right? And I think that's more powerful. And then get into the checklist of features and make sure it maps your flow. The other thing I would say is don't try to customize the system to you. Try to find the system that's a natural fit already and make compromises, right? Like not on the important stuff, but on the little things. Figure out what is flexible and what's not. No, Mark, what do you think? I know you're.
Yeah, I mean the last point. I mean that's what stops people getting the most out of their technology. Well, I want it to do it this way. Well, it's not cost effective to build it how every individual organization wants to do it. If you want to do that, you're getting into ERP and custom development and squillions of dollars to do it. Well, that's not the hospitality industry. It never will be. So use the tool as it's been designed, because normally it's been designed around some sort of a best practice. And if you want to get the most out of it, take advantage of that functionality. And the other thing I was going to say, one of the questions I like to ask is, I always like to ask a technology provider, what do you not like about your solution? What are you not happy with? Because then you get honesty, right? You get honesty, and they tell you, hey, we think we're doing good things here, but we don't think we're going as well as we could with this, and it's an area of focus that we want to fix. That's what I'm always looking for, is a real relationship where it's open and everyone understands that as good as the things are that you do, it's not always perfect, and there's room for improvement, and people are realistic about that, because that's key. You've got to be realistic on your expectations between each other, and particularly industry to its vendor community. Technology development is not hospitality operations. It's different pressures. Relationships are key if you want to get the most out of your technology.
Awesome. So I'd love to hop into the Q&A. We do have about 5 minutes left, and I like to be mindful of time. So the first question that popped in was the rationale behind calling it a revolution and not an evolution. And I guess I could quickly touch on this as I named the webinar. Prior to COVID-19, I would say we were in a bit of a technological evolution where it was slowly progressing throughout. And then when COVID hit and everyone had to work from home, and those on server-based systems didn't have access to their information, we started to see this uptick in people looking to switch over, and it started to have a snowball effect into a revolution. So that's sort of what the meaning why behind the name of the webinar. The next question is from Carl, and I think all of you would have great input onto this question. Is the future of the guest journey seamless and less clunky and mobile-based to engage guest staff interactions with all the hotel offerings from the palm of their hand as a choice? Tom, we'll start with you.
Absolutely, sure. Of course it is. I mean, we began talking about cloud. Your guests are already in the cloud and are using many different devices as they come in. So the future, of course, is more direct, more seamless interaction that is guest-centric.
Perfect. And does anyone have anything they'd like to add on to that?
Yeah, I'd say that, yes, it's in the palm of their hand, but it won't be driven by button pushing. It'll be driven by voice. Voice will return to its position as the preferred communication method in the next 5 years. So button pushing won't be as important anymore.
Awesome. And then this next question is about API. Lots of talk on API integrations. It'd be really helpful to hear the group's opinion on API documentation. So is it the single biggest facet that will drive adoption or create friction for developers looking to build onto a product?
Well, I think that the API documentation is definitely needed. You see things like you need error messages when you're working with the API, but even more important is the vendor relationship, right? If you're going in and coding to the API, there better be a very clear use case to doing that and using developer time. In general, the purpose of that documentation is for companies to work together. So it just helps the speed of development. That's the main reason we do it. Of course, it's interesting to have your own functionality added on top, but I would almost look at, again, the partnerships and finding close partners that already do it right versus building your own.
Cassie, I know this is your area as well. Do you have anything you'd like to add on that?
I mean, yeah, I mean, there is such a thing as useful or not useful documentation. Just because it's written down doesn't mean it's helpful. I mean, we really try to build the documentation as we're building out the API, but you also have to keep it current. So that's only going to be as useful as the effort put into it. So those just might be some things to consider if you're trying to start a project and you're looking over the documentation, asking the vendor, do you keep it current, and how do I get notified of changes and all of that sort of thing.
Awesome. And then this one, Mark, I think this one would be perfect for you. Does anyone know how much money hotels have allocated to the tech stack, or like what would you recommend for a hotel just starting off building, the percentage to allocate?
Oh, I mean, you know, there are many facets to that, but you know, it has a lot to do with product and service offering. It has a lot to do with you know, the tier that you sit in the industry. So it's not really a one size fits all. But you know, depending, you know, for example, for a you know, we're getting up. I think 5-star hotel rooms. I think today we're talking about you know, sometimes up to $1 million and a half per room, right? So from a technical perspective, you know, I always think that a good rule of thumb for your build investment is in the vicinity of about 10%, and that's for your entire technology environment, the whole lot, right? But it really does change as you sort of get through the different tiers of the type of accommodation or resort product. One thing I would say though, and I often challenge this, is does a 3-star hotel, for example, need more technology than a 5-star hotel? I would argue it does. Less people, more automation. So, you know, there's an interesting sort of interplay there, but it really does come down to, you know, what the particular company wants to deliver from a product and service experience, and that's going to drive the investment. So it's hard to sort of throw a figure out there that's indicative. I think that's the best I could probably offer. So
awesome. And then we just have one last question before we wrap it up. How important is it to use technology to measure diversity and inclusion? Who would like to kick this one off?
Well,
It's an interesting question.
It really is. Yeah, I know. I was thinking about it when I saw it pop up. I know it's definitely a conversation we've had with our CS team on how we can be more inclusive with our technology and our development for everyone to be able to use it and access it.
I can offer one piece of insight, but it's not to do with Event Temple. It's one of my friend's companies, is an internal communications leader. And they work with huge companies to manage internal comms. And the sorts of things they track are, how is the communication and usage of tools throughout the entire organization and all the technology? Who's using it and who isn't, right? Who's engaged and who isn't? I think if you have a big brand, those are things to look at. I think as you have a smaller organization, it becomes more of a challenge, right? But what we find is that some companies, some people are highly engaged, they have a voice, and other people aren't, right? Other people are sort of forgotten, or they don't feel like they can engage with the business. So that's my impression of it. I think ease of use comes to mind as well. for us, and making sure that no one's sort of left out because they haven't taken a special course or they're not tech savvy. Yeah, it's an interesting one for sure.
It's hard. It's a really interesting question. You know, I mean, well, I guess it's, I mean, diversity means a lot of things to a lot of people. So, you know, I'm certainly taking one approach to it, but yeah, I really would have, yeah, I don't think I have anything intelligent to add to that. I'm very sorry.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for attending today, and thank you all for being panelists. I think it was a very lively discussion with a lot of information for our attendees to learn from. Again, if you have any other questions, you can reply to the email and I will do my best to answer them or send them out to the appropriate parties. So thank you, Tom. Thank you, Cassie. Thank you, Mark. And thank you, Bob. I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Pleasure.
And stay safe, everyone.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.